What's up YouTube, Saf here on SuperSaf TV, and in this video we're going to be doing another SuperSaf style camera comparison, this time between the OnePlus 6 and the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus. So in the usual style, I'll be looking at both the front and rear facing cameras, and at images as well as video too. Do also look out for the audio icon in the corner of the screen, and that will indicate to you which device the audio is coming from, and I'll be switching between these two throughout this video to give you guys a better idea of the differences in audio as well. So we're currently outdoors, it's a great day, lots of sunshine, and we are testing out the front facing cameras. We'll be switching to the rear facing cameras shortly, but firstly let's go ahead and test out the stabilization from the front facing cameras. So we're just going to be walking. Now let's go ahead and run. Now we've moved on to the rear facing cameras. We're filming at 4K 30 frames a second. Now we do have optical zoom on the S9 Plus, so if we tap that we can go in. It's digital zoom on the OnePlus 6. We'll switch back. Right, now we're just going to have a look at the stabilization at 4K 30 frames a second. So just taking a walk, and now let's go ahead and run. Now same test, but we are at 4K 60. This video is exported out at 4K 30, so you know, might not be able to exactly tell how well this works, but one thing that I'm really interested in is stabilization at 4K 60. So let's go ahead and now run. Here we go. Just testing out the autofocus on the OnePlus 6. Seems to be struggling here. So it's focused okay on the S9 Plus, but then when we move on to these flowers, it's kind of hunting. Weird. Yep, still hunting. Still hunting on here, so it's kind of interesting. Now trying the same test on the S9 Plus, and as you can see, there's no problems whatsoever, there's no hunting. So it does seem to be much better here on the S9 Plus. So that was the video. Now before we move on to images, having a quick look at what we're working with here. For the front facing cameras, the OnePlus 6 does have a much higher resolution, although the S9 Plus has a wider aperture with autofocus. For the rear facing cameras, we've got dual cameras on both devices, but very different setups. The OnePlus 6 has a primary 16 megapixel camera with a secondary 20 megapixel camera, both with an f1.7 aperture. And the secondary camera seems to only help with the bokeh mode. It doesn't seem to be doing anything else. With the S9 Plus, the primary camera has a dual aperture, so it's going to switch between f1.5 and f2.4 depending on the amount of light in your environment. And the secondary camera is the telephoto camera, which is going to give you 2x optical zoom, and this also helps with the bokeh mode. Now if you like the skins that I've got here on both devices, then you can pick some up from our channel sponsor Dbrand. I'm going to be leaving them linked in the description below. Now all the shots that you're going to be seeing have been shot on automatic, and I haven't tweaked anything, and that is to keep things as fair as possible. And speaking of fair, the one thing that I do have to mention before we dive into things is that the OnePlus 6 is much cheaper compared to the S9 Plus. Here are the prices for the equivalent 128GB versions, and you can see that you're going to be saving quite a bit of money on the OnePlus 6, and this is something that you definitely have to bear in mind when we see the results. Right, so let's get straight to it, and we're starting off with some selfies. You can see here that both are doing a pretty good job overall. Slight differences in color. The OnePlus 6 is slightly cooler, the S9 Plus is slightly warmer, but the OnePlus 6 does seem sharper, and that is because we have 16 megapixels versus 8 megapixels, and you can crop in much further because of this on the OnePlus 6, and it does get the advantage here. Now trying out a selfie in a slightly different situation. And here I actually like the S9 Plus better overall. I think it's balanced the dynamic range better. If you look towards the background, things have been blown out a little bit more on the OnePlus 6. whereas they have been slightly better maintained on the S9 Plus. The S9 Plus also has a selfie portrait mode, which is going to blur the background. This is something that's not currently available on the OnePlus 6, but will be coming later on with a software update. Unfortunately, this was not available at the time of this video. Now, testing out selfies in low light, I think both are doing a good job overall. I think the S9 Plus is slightly brighter, and I think that is because of the wider f1.7 aperture. But when we do use the front-facing flashes, I do prefer the OnePlus 6 image. It does seem to be a better balanced overall shot. The S9 Plus is not doing bad at all, but it is a little bit on the yellow side. Now moving on to some outdoor shots, so we've got some shots of some flowers looking absolutely fine on both devices. If you're going 100%, you can see that we can crop in slightly further on the OnePlus 6, and that is because we have a high resolution, 16 megapixels versus 12. But then if we do move on to an outdoor wide shot, I went to this situation because it's very tricky in terms of dynamic range. We've got the sun in the background, and here you can see that the S9 Plus is doing a much better job in terms of dynamic range. The sun has been blown out completely on the OnePlus 6, whereas this has been maintained on the S9 Plus. And it seems to be thanks to the multi-frame image processing that the S9 Plus has. The S9 Plus also has optical zoom, so if we do use that here, you can see that we've got a much cleaner shot on the S9 Plus. And if we go in 200% on this image, you can see that things are much sharper on the S9 Plus. And that is once again thanks to that dedicated optical zoom. Now let's move on to the bokeh mode, the portrait mode on both devices, which is going to blur the background. The first thing you will notice is that on the OnePlus 6, things are much wider, and both of these images were taken from roughly the same distance. And that is because for the S9 Plus, it does use the Telephoto camera, which has that optical zoom. But in terms of edge detection, I think both are doing great overall. And to make things a bit more comparable, I did get my brother to move in closer, who was taking this shot. And here once again, you can see that both are doing absolutely great overall. Now I thought I'd try a different situation, something with a bit more tricky dynamic range. And once again, in terms of edge detection, both are doing absolutely great. But the OnePlus 6 seems to be doing better in terms of dynamic range. If you look towards the background, the highlights have been blown out on the S9 Plus, whereas these have been maintained on the OnePlus 6. However, we do have some noise in the foreground of the OnePlus 6 image. If you look towards my trousers, there is a lot of noise here. I'm not sure why this is, whereas the image is a little cleaner overall on the S9 Plus. Now let's move on to low light images, and both are doing a good job overall, but the S9 Plus seems to have better maintained the colors and also seems a tad brighter. If you go in 200%, you can also see that it's sharper on the S9 Plus, and this does seem to be thanks to the super wide f1.5 aperture. Trying out another shot outdoors in low light, once again the S9 Plus a much brighter and sharper image. And finally, I thought I'd try a low light indoor image, and this is with very low light. You can barely see anything. And the S9 Plus, once again, doing a much better job. The OnePlus 6 actually struggled to focus on here. I did tap to focus a few times, but it just could not focus into this little toy. Right, so there we have it, guys. The SuperSaf style camera comparison between the OnePlus 6 and the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus. I think both did good overall. Now, when it comes to front-facing camera images, I'd say it's a bit of a draw. The OnePlus 6 does have a lot more resolution, so it's going to give you sharper and more detailed images, but the S9 Plus does have slightly better dynamic range. For low light selfies, I think both did really well overall. However, I do think that the OnePlus 6 had a better front-facing flash. And when it came to the front-facing camera for video, I think both did very good overall. They're very stable as well. However, both of them do crop in to achieve that stabilization, so that is something that you're going to have to bear in mind. But overall for video from the front-facing camera, I would call it a bit of a draw. Now moving on to the rear-facing cameras, in terms of outdoor images, the OnePlus 6 does have more resolution, so you are going to be able to crop in further. But the S9 Plus has much better dynamic range. And you've also got the zoom option on the S9 Plus, which is going to give you optical zoom versus digital zoom on the OnePlus 6. For video, both were very good quality-wise, and both were also very similar in terms of stabilization. I would say that the S9 Plus did seem a tad sharper. The stabilization wasn't so great on either at 4K 60 frames a second, unfortunately. And autofocus was much better on the S9 Plus. You've got that dual pixel autofocus, which is very fast and accurate. On the OnePlus 6, it did struggle quite a bit. Now hopefully this can be fixed with a software update, but currently the OnePlus 6 does not have great autofocus in my experience. For slow motion, I'd say it's a bit of a draw. Both were doing very well at 1080p 240 frames a second. And at 720p, although the S9 Plus can do 960 frames a second, it is only a short burst of 0.2 seconds, whereas the OnePlus 6 can do up to a minute at 420 frames a second, so you can slow this down after the fact, which is definitely an advantage. For the portrait mode shots, I think both did good overall. I did prefer the dynamic range on the OnePlus 6, but there was a little bit of noise there. And on the S9 Plus, you can edit the blur after the fact, which is quite nice to have. For low light, the S9 Plus was better. You had less noise with better colors maintained and a sharper image. And once again, that is thanks to that super wide f1.5 aperture. And finally, audio. Both of these do record in stereo audio, which is great, but I did prefer the S9 Plus more. The audio to me just sounded cleaner, whereas it was a little bit tinny on the OnePlus 6. I think overall both cameras did do really well. One thing, once again, that you do have to bear in mind is how much cheaper the OnePlus 6 is coming in at. So although the S9 Plus was better in some situations, such as autofocus as well as low light, you are going to be paying more for those features. That's what I think anyway. What do you think? Definitely drop me a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you want to see lots of images from lots of different devices, then definitely give me a follow on Instagram. I'm at SuperSaf. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, then do hit that thumbs up button for me. It really does help me out. And if you haven't already, then be sure to subscribe and switch on notifications. There's lots more SuperSaf style videos coming up on here. Thanks for watching. This is Saf on SuperSaf TV. I'll see you next time.